Hello, Thought Roomies, and welcome. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for pressing play on this episode this week. It's been a crazy couple of weeks. I was in Los Angeles just a few days ago, and I was having a blast there. I'd never really spent time in LA doing all these podcast interviews. Things got kind of strange really fast. I went to a Whole Foods, and things of the virus, people have been talking about it and things were bubbling up. It was in my awareness, but I didn't really have any sense of fear. I really just had this deep sense of trust that everything was going to be okay until I walked into this Whole Foods. As I was walking in with my friend, there was a lady wearing a mask, and she had 3 carts of things being carted out after her by these Whole Foods attendants, water and toilet paper. And I felt like when I entered that Whole Foods, I stepped through some very strange portal of fear. It was palpable. It was tangible. The look in people's eyes was terrified. The energy in there was buzzing. And at first I was kind of laughing, inwardly going, this is nuts. Are people overreacting to this? Went through, obviously all the toilet paper was gone. I went through and the dairy was gone. And I just was like, this is really strange. And then it settled into me. I felt afraid. I felt this sense of maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm not being prepared. Maybe I need to be finding toilet paper. So, got a couple of things. I was really there because I wanted to get a couple of herbs and things for immune boosting. And I got those things and I left, and I just had this strange feeling that stuck with me. What I realize now is we're also interconnected. And when you walk into a situation like that, we feel people. And this is a beautiful thing about being human. We have this innate ability to feel each other, to empathize. This is not new. This is not even hippy-dippy, airy-fairy. This is true because you've heard about stories of mob mentality where something psychological just takes over in these situations and people start riots, they start mobs, and it's like something just came over me. Well, this is our ability to tap into the collective, and I really think that's what happened to me the other day. I think it was happening for a lot of other people too, because as I was consuming social media that day, even the people that I look to as very enlightened, grounded, spiritual people, a great deal of them were having difficulty and saying, yeah, I'm feeling kind of strange too. But it was beautiful to watch. The next day, I think a lot of people found their center again. And that's how I'm feeling now. I'm feeling much more centered in all of it. But I certainly had a day where I was just so anxious, you guys. I was trying to breathe. I was trying to stretch. And I just felt like there was nothing I could do to feel okay. That's control, right? This is so human. What's important, I think, in this whole experience is to just allow, to not turn away from the fear, because the fear is here as a teacher. And the fear is actually something that has kept us alive for a very long time. So our fear is not really something we should berate or judge. It's something to say, hey, come sit with me. Let me understand you. So it took me a while, but I eventually got to that place through the use of my daily practices. And these are things that I've been using for a long time that I feel like have been training me for an experience like this. So again, coming back to your breath, I've been thinking about the breath a lot because it's there, it's in the background all the time, and yet we're not really conscious of it most of the time. And when you feel out of control, when you feel like the walls are caving in on you, there's not much you can do. I mean, in this situation, there are tips and guidelines for how we can flatten the curve and all this, but ultimately, I think the fear we're experiencing is this lack of control. One thing that you can control is your breath. And the beautiful thing about the breath is it is connected to our entire physiology. It's connected to our blood, it's connected to our brain. And when you can consciously slow down, oxygenate yourself, even slow down your speaking, slow down your voice like I'm doing right now, and find your center. So much can come from that place of clarity. So I want to talk a little bit about what I am doing during this time. What I am doing is really trying to stick to all of my habits, my regular habits. And it's so easy when we get in a panic to just let all of that go. And what you'll end up doing, I think, if you only focus on the panic of it, is you will create a reality for yourself that is a nightmare. Everything that you see will be fear. It will be the coronavirus. It will be the threat. So to consciously bring yourself back and, in a way, like force yourself to stick to what you know is good for you. The person that knows you best in the whole universe is you. So when it comes to advice from other people, take it with a grain of salt. Feel into what resonates. Like right now is a time to get in touch with your intuition. You will see so much, depending on who you follow on social media, how often you're checking the news, you'll see so much about what to do. Listen to that inner voice within you. And that inner voice is not the one, there's two voices probably at least going on in your head right now. There's one that's speaking like this, it's really fast, and it's kind of like, you need to do this, you need to do that. And then there's another one that's here. And it lives in a rooted place inside of you, and it just knows what to do. For some of you, that's the voice saying, now's the time to travel home. For some of you, it's saying, get a few extra supplies. But even in our conversations with each other, I think it's important to be using discernment right now. New things are coming up all the time. Articles, rumors is a big one. I have a community in New York City, and things are, picking up there. And there was this whole tweet that went viral that ended up not being true about the whole city shutting down and kind of the subways. And it really threw people into a tizzy. And so to be careful about what you're sharing, to be checking your sources, to be checking your own intention behind why you're sharing it, and to just really be sharpening your own intuition. This is such a beautiful invitation right now for all of us to be sharpening our intuition. So my intuition told me to cancel my trip to Austin and to kind of be somewhere where I could stay really rooted and grounded and get back to myself. And right now, when we're struggling to know what to do, the question I ask myself is like, okay, what are my gifts? And where am I going to be of the most service? And to me, that was in a place where I felt safe, where I had enough food, and I knew I could do this with you guys, and I could share what I know. I also want to intro this week's episode of The Thought Room. This week's episode of The Thought Room is with Jordan River. Jordan is the creator of Spirit Science on YouTube, which is this great animation channel. Spirit Science has over 900,000 subscribers, and Spirit Science Official has 1.2 million followers on Instagram. So Jordan and I sat down at Soltara Healing Center. This is also a part of the Soltara series that I did down in Costa Rica, sharing about people's journeys with ayahuasca and healing and growth experiences there. We've been offering, as a part of this series, a discount to anyone who's considering visiting Soltara for a retreat. And we will put the info for that in the show notes, but it's $200 off your plant medicine retreat. And you use the link soltara.co/thoughtroom. So that's soltara.co/thoughtroom. And then when you get to the checkout, punch in the code ThoughtRoom, all one word, for $200 off. I really love this episode. I think it's super timely in a lot of ways. Jordan talks about some super profound experiences he had with ayahuasca and how it connected him to this sense of oneness. And I can't help but feel that in light of recent events, this is something that we are being called to as a collective, to reunite with this sense of us all being connected to each other. And that is coming out in the shadows that we're dancing with during this trying and difficult time. So I encourage you to listen to this episode, to find healing in it, and to find some moments of playfulness too. We talk about astral projection, we talk about tarot cards, and I hope that this episode brings you lightness. It brings you a sense of centeredness within yourself. And thank you so much. And without further ado, let's step into the thought room with my friend Jordan River of Spirit Science. Jordan River, welcome to the Thought Room. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we are currently here at Soltara Healing Center. This is part of the Soltara series I'm doing. And you are here as a guest this week. That's correct?
That is correct.
And have you been to Soltara before, or is this your first time?
This is my first time.
Okay, but you've been to other plant medicine centers, is that correct?
Yes, I've been to Rhythmia several times.
Okay, so we're talking about ayahuasca and plant medicine specifically. You have just had, what number ceremony was?
Well, this week we just did our second a day ago, but that would have been my 30th ceremony that I've ever done.
30th?
Yeah.
Wow. And when was your first ceremony?
First ceremony was February of 2018.
February of 2018. Okay. Wow. So you've done 30 ceremonies since February of 2018.
Yeah. And that's just with the ayahuasca. Like I've had years of experience before then with other medicines and many times in sort of a sacred ceremonial space, but never quite like this is another level, you know, like these Aya centers are just another level of ceremony where it was other times it's just, you know, putting it on with friends and stuff and you treat it sacredly, but this incorporates tradition in a much deeper way.
Wow. That's, I mean, as we record this, it's December of 2019. So that's a substantial amount of ceremonies in a short period of time. I'm curious of your perspective on this because a lot of people, you always hear that thing. It's like, well, once you get the message, hang up the phone. Have you heard that? Have you heard that saying before? You
mean like if you do it one time?
Well, there's some criticisms of, and I think it's a valid conversation of doing a lot of anything, you know? So what's your perspective on all that? And kind of like what's kept you coming back to this plant medicine in particular?
Yeah. Well, I think that like, you know, when it comes to the plant medicine, there's always more to learn. There's always more. And of course, doing anything a lot can become a detriment if you become addicted or attached to having this particular outcome with it. When it comes to the plant medicine ceremonies for me, my trips down here to Costa Rica are about 3 or 4 times a year, right? And that, I mean, so this is my 8th trip, right? And in the grand scheme of things, I don't really feel like it's all that much. But the thing is that if you're coming to the ceremonies with a really sacred and pure intention, you have an open heart and you're there to learn and to grow and to heal, then it always can, it really is a profound tool that you can use to go deeper and deeper into yourself and discover who you are and find your path and everything like that. And so, you know, many people who come and they do it, they have it the one time they're like, wow, I was profoundly changed, and they're good for a long period of time. And I don't know, for me, I seem to be on this path of just very rapid growth in this moment. You know, this is the direction that I seem to be going. And I'm very grateful for the opportunities to go the distance and to work with this medicine in a way that is really sacred and pure. And the result of it is my life is, I'm so grateful. I'm so happy and thankful and in love every single day because of the experiences that I've had and the lessons that I've learned, and applying those to my life after every ceremony.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed because, you know, you're a relatively young dude and you have created a very successful platform, which is spirit science. And I want to back up and I want to give you the opportunity, if you'd like, to share the story of how that began and what it's kind of become now. But take us through that trajectory and maybe the Jordan who you were when that began versus what it's kind of now exploded into.
Right. Well, okay. So as a part of the story is like, when I was a kid, when I was about 12 years old, I became obsessed with animation. And I started on the side of like dictionaries, like stick figures fighting in like a, flip book style. And then when I was 13, I discovered Adobe Flash, it was Adobe Flash at the time, and started making cartoons on the internet and uploading them. And I just, that was like my life for pretty much up until now. It's just, I loved making these cartoons, and they were always just silly stories or video game parodies and stuff like that. But it was when I turned 19, it was December 2010, January 2011, I had just a series of experiences that really woke me up. Like, I think the door had kind of opened a little bit with a few very spiritual, there's a lot of symbolism and ideas in like certain animes that I was watching at the time. But then
what were some of those that you were really into?
My favorite of all time is Gurren Lagann, which is the story of this, like, really this personal transformation and saving the whole universe. But it's like this journey of the soul as it reflects in the characters. And this just, I mean, I could really go into that for an hour, and I'll save you the drama of it. But as a note for anybody listening too, like, if you're looking for a really good show to watch that's very spiritually focused, like Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, amazing. Full Metal Alchemist, also really profound. That said, those are kind of opening the doors a bit. And then I met someone who introduced me to like chakras and energy and Reiki and crystals. And I was like, this is very interesting. There's something to this. I don't know what it is, but I'm very fascinated by the concept. And so I started learning about it. And then everything kind of like connected together in a very profound cannabis experience. Unlike anyone I've ever had. I've never had an experience just like this with cannabis before, but it was after college one day, after just a day in school, and I was smoking weed with a friend of mine in her car. We were just talking, and then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, it's like I was taken from my body and my mind exploded with light. And I saw how, like, it was like every thought, every idea, every person, every plant, animal, planet, atom, star, like everything in the universe, all connected to a singular point and was all emanating and a part of this one thing. And it was just like the awareness of unity consciousness just exploded into me. And I, very quickly I came back, to my body in the car, and I was like, I understand everything, just like freaking out. And it was so funny. And my friend's like, oh yeah, you inhaled for the first time, didn't you? And it was just like, I was like, no, this is so different. And from that moment, it set me on this path of really just devoting myself to learning. And so synchronistically, I came across, it was actually my mom, she gave me the Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life books. And those had such an impactful weight on me. They changed my life so much. They introduced me to so many different things. And it was my love of animation and the wisdom I had received from not only that book, but like The Secret and like all these other things I was reading that like fused together to create the first series of Spirit Science, or the first season. And from there, it just kind of, the ball just exploded, like it got so big.
when did you release? So when was the first Spirit Science episode, and what was it? What were you like, yeah, this has got to be the first episode?
It was April 11th, 2011.
Okay.
And it was the Spirit Science episode called Thoughts. And it was like kind of based on The Secret, kind of based on Drunvalo's work. But the interesting thing is like a lot of the later episodes, especially in that first season, were kind of like, I paraphrased a lot of stuff right out of Drunvalo's books. But the first episode I wrote myself. And so there's a little personal touch in that. It was like, that was entirely me, based on all of the material I was reading, like with The Secret and this and that and Flower of Life and stuff. So, but yeah, it seemed like just the right place to start with, because, you know, the whole lesson with the thoughts is like your thoughts and your feelings create your reality, and you create your reality. And like, I think starting there was the best place to go, because most people have this idea about life that is, it happens to you, and you have no really control over the bad things that happen to you. But we really do, both in how we respond and how we react and what we learn from it and what we do with our lives. We really have like the complete creative control if we're willing. It's strange. We have control if we surrender to, you know, understanding the higher lessons.
The paradoxes.
The great paradox. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is so fascinating. And it's easy to talk about, and it's easy to read these spiritual texts and all these thought leaders, because I remember reading a lot about The Secret and watching the movies and the films and going, okay, conceptually, you know, I get that, manifesting your reality, but I didn't really feel it for a very long time. And I've told this story briefly before on this podcast, but the name of this podcast, The Thought Room, is essentially this. It's an experience that I had when I came to Soltara as a guest. And I think it was my second ceremony ever with ayahuasca. I kind of was brought into this space where I call it like an infinite sandbox of blackness, and there was nothing in it except for my lofty awareness. And then suddenly I had my first thought in that space, and instantly it physically manifested before me in this cosmic sandbox via color and vibration and experience. And there was an emotion attached to the thought that I could so clearly see, as if I was looking at a painting, and not only looking at it, but feeling it around me. And it was quite terrifying, to be honest. I got scared. And the second thought was, oh, this is scary. And it was amazing to watch the first thought of, oh, this is really neat. Look at this space. Look how warm this is. I'm enjoying these colors too. I'm afraid. Whew, the room changed. It got small and dark and cold. And I didn't like how I felt inside of that thought. And so that's where this tool essentially was delivered to me that I just thought was going to be a thing I used in my daily life. I journaled the thought room, use the thought room, as in pay attention to how you feel inside of each thought that you're having. Do you feel good or do you not feel good? If you don't feel good, choose a different thought, choose a different pathway, choose a different reality. So this is, I mean, that very much aligns with my experience, but it was really hard to feel until you feel it. You know, it's easy to think about and kind of a really hard thing to understand. But so going back to Spirit Science, you did your first video on thoughts. You put it out into the internet sphere. Did you have any sense that it would be as big as it was? Did you have like this weighty feeling of, oh, I'm about to do something really huge for the world? Or was it just this playful sort of, I like making animation videos that are spiritually themed?
I think it was a little bit of both, but mostly it was just, I don't want to say just fun. It was just fun. And there was a part of me that was like, man, if the whole world knew about this stuff, we'd have a different world overnight. But I had no idea that it would be so well received and grow so quickly. That was entirely like a surprise. And it really did a number on me, because I've had so many people emailing me and messaging me as if I'm the Messiah and being like, like, can you interpret my dreams for me? And other people saying, like just sending, I mean, there's so much love. And the whole thing, it was really difficult to deal with for a long time. I didn't know how to deal with it. Sometimes it went to my head, and other times I was like, I am a lowly worm, kind of riding this wave. And I take all the comments to heart. So, both the praise and like, a lot of people just being really hateful. This is blasphemy. This is, there's a funny polarity too on that spectrum, because on one side, Jesus is the way, and therefore everything I'm talking about is malarkey. And on the other side, it's an atheist perspective. It's like, none of this has any merits. There is no such thing as spirit, and therefore you're insane. And so I've ridden the wave between those two, and really had to learn to harmonize within myself, and learn how to also like filter the information and the perspectives and understand where people are coming from and integrate their perspectives without making it personal and feeling personally attacked, because I've had a lot of that too.
No doubt.
Yeah.
That seems like it would be incredibly hard to navigate. In fact, it would be enough to make some people give up. They would just be like, I can't handle, you've got multiple different groups on other ends of the spectrum saying, this is garbage. That's got to be really hard.
Very mixed things. Yeah. Well, it's funny because I fully understand why celebrities generally have a hard time and often would turn to drugs. Like, I'm very grateful I didn't have that experience. The worst that I went through was lots of cannabis, smoked cigarettes for a while, but that was for sort of a different reason. And some alcohol at one point, which was just trying to numb some experiences that I was feeling. But most of it was cannabis. The thing is like, when you have thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people even, all watching you or watching something that you created and putting their attention on you, that you become a conduit for all of that energy, like all of that consciousness. So it's like, so for the Hollywood celebrities who have like millions and millions of people, even billions of people sometimes watching them, they have to learn how to be really centered with themselves, because the whole world knows who they are. And that's a lot of energy for someone to deal with. So I actually fully get why like cocaine and other drugs become like very commonplace, because it's a way to cope with that if they don't have the spiritual practice to be able to like center within themselves and become a pure vessel for the light to come through, right? Because then what happens is people look up to you and they gain wisdom and insight from you, just from like being connected to you, from following them. And it's very important that if you're in that position, you have to really maintain like a really high vibration, or else it's very easy to stumble.
Because there's so many projections, like both positive and negative. Like you were saying, some people are saying, you're the greatest for doing this. You're the Messiah. You're saving planet Earth with these messages. And then you're going to get the equal and opposite of that. Of course, it's really intense. And I have a lot of respect for that characteristic. I used to, in my previous lifetime here, I actually spent a brief period of time in New York City working for various A-list celebrities too, and kind of in their homes and things like that. And that really gave me an education in exactly what you're talking about, because the world treats them differently. We walk into a restaurant and a table always clears up and people are whispering and looking, and you're constantly fielding people's energy and people's projections, and it becomes incredibly hard to sort through what is real. Is this person being nice to me because they are genuine? Are they being nice because they're sucking up to me because I am this personality that they're projecting onto? And it becomes hard to know who to trust or what is really real. So I can understand how that can be incredibly difficult at times. Do you get recognized, or not so much because you're mostly in animation form?
It used to be worse because I kind of disappeared for a while and kind of, stopped putting myself out there. But when Spirit Science first blew up, I was getting stopped in the airports, like on my ways to different places. And, you know, if I went to a certain place, like I have there's a community in Asheville, for example, that I really love. And like everyone kind of knows me there, or at least there's a group of people who do. But it's been a while since that's really happened a lot, but it has happened. I think I'm very grateful that spirit science hadn't hit the mainstream, at least not yet. I'm expecting that might happen someday, but like I feel like it was good for me to have like, here's 1 or 2 people coming up and saying hi, and it was like hello, and just really connecting with. But it's kind of underground in the sense that it's not like, I'm not on the news, at least again, not yet.
I was going to say, what are you considering underground here? Because by my last calculation, spirit science has like 1.2 million followers on Instagram and almost 1 million probably subscribers are on YouTube. Like, I mean, what does it look like to go mainstream for you?
I don't know actually. But I think the big thing is like when people who follow spirit science, like, you know, it's on YouTube, it's on the website, there's our community and Spirit Mysteries, and that's kind of it. Like, you don't see spirit science on the news. You don't see it covered on TV, you know, Google News or whatever, like those kind of outlets. And like, there's gossip columns, and I'm grateful I'm not appearing on those and stuff like that. And I mean, anything could happen, I guess. But like, that's kind of, I think, what I'm thinking, you know, and it's funny because it's like, at the same time, there's a huge benefit to that, but it's also like a tremendous responsibility, because you really have to keep your ego in check. Every moment that you make an appearance of some kind, you have to like be bringing the light, bringing the love.
How do you do that? Like, and have you struggled with that at various times with your own ego, where you've had to check yourself? Because this is always something. I was just having a conversation at lunch about this. And actually yesterday I was talking with Luke Story, and we were talking about humility and, you know, having platforms, because obviously he does as well. And we're all kind of in this sphere. And what does it mean to be humble? And he said something that I just found was so brilliant. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but humility is not playing small or making yourself like dimming your light. Humility is embracing the truth of who you are. So some of us are just great singers. And so to be humble is actually to recognize that light of being a great singer, or being a great writer, or a great speaker, and owning it fully in a light-filled sense, and with this embodiment that is honoring of the gifts that you've been given in this lifetime, you know? So I really love that, but I'd love to hear your perspective on how you've navigated that, or if you've struggled with it at times.
Well, absolutely. You know, we all have lessons in ego and stuff like that. And I'm actually really grateful for the plant medicine, for the ayahuasca, for showing me how I've been, you know, I carried for so long this anger that was within me that came from a lot of childhood trauma and abuse that I experienced, and just the ways that it subtly manifested and showed up in my life in different ways, like, absolutely. And I think that, like, as far as videos go, like in the spirit science cartoons themselves, like, I really feel like when I put together a script and I'm working on one, like, I really try and leave my ego at the door. And because I have the script and I'm going over it over and over, I can always make revisions and like update the script as it goes throughout. So it's a much more polished product. But sometimes there's like video blogs that I'll make where I'm like, oh, I could have done that a lot better. And that's you know, especially when it's a video blog, because it's like me putting myself out there. It's not premeditated. It's just like a live expression. But I think, like, I mean, really what you said, like, humility, one of the greatest tools to use for that. And I'm reading a book right now called Complete Guide to World Mysticism. And it's brilliant. And it explains like all the different pathways that mystics have used in all the different traditions to reach that state of oneness. And humility is a big part, especially in the early Christian mysticism. And it's like described as really the surrender of the individual I am to embrace the fullness of the total, the oneness, the greater I am. And yeah, that was really beautiful. The other thing I was going to say too is prayer. Like I've been praying a lot lately. It was actually ever since this workshop I gave at Rhythmia several weeks ago. There was a friend of mine named Ben Decker, and he was talking a lot about the nature of miracles. And he was describing how prayer is one of the ways to actually cultivate miracles, because you're in communication with the divine. And just praying regularly and opening up that channel of communication, it keeps you humble, because you're constantly in a state of acknowledging the greater powers that be all around you, right? And you yourself are like, one twinkle of light in a field of light. And that humility of going, I am one with everything, and you become more of a vessel in service, which is really beautiful. Yeah,
I love this idea of prayer, and I think for many people, when they hear the word prayer, they immediately, some of them recoil, or some of them elate. It depends on your upbringing and I suppose your religious affiliation. But for me, and this is just my personal opinion, I think prayer can have so many meanings. And prayer can be putting a vase of fresh flowers on your dinner table and honoring those flowers and honoring the family that's about to sit down to eat. Prayer can be in the shower, tuning into the water, the clean water that is coming through your faucet, through your shower head, and being humble to the fact that you have that. Or prayer can mean, sitting in front of an altar, or using your mala beads, or kneeling in front of a pew. I think it's important to just distinguish that prayer can look like so many things for so many different people.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Hermeticism. And one of the kind of fundamental aspects of those teachings is that like every spirituality is there's like an infinite number of ways to worship and praise that which is divine. And so, it doesn't matter if, like we were saying, like it's just praising the water, or praising, it's like you're lying in bed and you're just, saying thank you for the day, or whatever it is, saying thank you for the food. And it doesn't have to be like, thank you, Jesus, or thank you, Archangel this or that, or thank you, Buddha, or any particular deity, because they're all just reflections and different manifestations of the divine, of the oneness. And it shows up in so many different ways. And as long as we're honoring that which is sacred, it doesn't matter. You're gonna be filled with the experience, and in some mystical way. Like it always shows up differently. Yeah.
I love this. And it's got me thinking about humility and its connection to gratitude and gratitude practices. And I was listening to a podcast the other day that was talking about gratitude and some studies done on people with depression that showed significant improvements with just implementing a daily gratitude practice of listing 3 things that they were thankful for and emailing it to literally anyone. Like it doesn't even have to get read. It's just an accountability thing, listing 3 things and kind of sending that off. Because also, in my opinion, when you write something, it's sort of contractual with the universe. That's why people write down their goals, New Year's resolutions, we journal. That's why our marriage contracts are written. You know what I mean? There's so much power, I think, in the written word. And when you can apply that to gratitude, for me at least, it's had life altering effects.
Yeah. We were talking about this in the integration circle earlier today, and how spelling is you're casting spells. It's literally
spelling is spelling. Wow.
It's in the word. Yeah. And it always just brings me back to Hermes, or Thoth in ancient Egyptian, right? He was the god of writing. He's the god of wisdom. He invented, or was, attributed with inventing like geometry, mathematics, music, art, astrology, astronomy, like all these different things. But the 2 things he was most often known for is being the god of wisdom and the god of writing. And you just imagine like the one who brought writing to the world sort of thing is just like this beautiful idea of teaching people how to preserve and maintain wisdom over time and tradition, as like, because you don't really have, the result of having the written language. Yeah, it's like grounding the wisdom that you have into something that you can then reference and come back to and draw upon greater and greater wisdom. Like, yeah, it's amazing.
I've talked about this, I think, before on the podcast too, but I love that we're on the topic of writing. This has been an integral part of my personal journey since I was really young. I was a weird child, and all I wanted to do was sit in the corner and just journal. And so I think my oldest diary is from either 1997 or 1998. So I was 7 or 8 years old at that point, writing about my life. And I have a diary, at least one, if not up to 5 or 10, from every single year of my life since then. So everything is chronicled. And I remember when I came to Soltara, one of my ceremonies here, this was as a guest, this was in May of this year, so 2019. One of my ceremonies was about my suffering. And I had every single year of my life poured my painful stories onto the pages of these diaries. Every time something horrible had happened, someone had died, I had come down with a chronic illness or been abused in some way, and I would not spare one juicy detail. It was all there. And when I came here, I was shocked that this one day I was just suffering so hard in ceremony, and I was like, what is this about? And I just felt like I was getting... like I was a fish that had been dragged out of the ocean, was just left to thrash around on the beach. Like I had no control, and I was just physically so uncomfortable. And I was like, what is this? I don't understand this. What is going on here? And it was like, this is your suffering. Can you let it go? And this feeling came up from inside my body that was like, no. It was like a toddler that was like stamping its foot. It's like, no. And then there's like this other me that's watching this all go down, being like, wait, what? Okay, my suffering is talking to this other version of myself, and it doesn't want to let go. And what I realized was these diaries, I still have them. Every time I've moved in my life from city to country, I have a literal piece of baggage, an actual suitcase with volumes of my written word with all of my sufferings in them. And I'd been planning for the longest time to write a book, which I was going to go through all these journal entries and retype some of them and create this probably like really painful, beautiful story to put out to the world. And what that ceremony was showing me, it was like, how much do you love your suffering? How much do you want to hang on to this? And I didn't want to let go of the stories because they were what made me special.
I hear you.
I was a survivor because I had suffered. And so I'd become so identified with the words that I had been putting on the page that, I didn't want to let them go. And not that evening, but I finally got my resolve with that and was able to let go of the suffering, and it changed my life, and it changed the way that I wrote, and it changed the way that I lived and manifested, because now some people might say, oh, you're just focusing on it's airy-fairy, you're just focusing on the good. No, I'm training my mind. I'm training my thoughts to go in the direction of what I choose. And for me, the most important thing is that I feel good, and what I'm doing elevates other people to feel good, do no harm. But really, it's important that I feel good too. I don't personally believe that we came here to live long lives full of suffering. Sure, it's hard. Life is incredibly hard. But I believe at the core, we're here to enjoy it and to lift each other up and to create beauty.
Very well said. I love that.
Thanks. So anyway, back to spirit science, because I'm enthralled with kind of just picturing the young Jordan releasing his first video out into the sphere. At what point were you like, oh, this this is going to be something. And like, did you wake up one day and there were just like a ton of views on one of your videos, or how did that happen?
That's a very good question. I don't know if I've actually still hit that point.
Come on.
No, I mean, so
much humility.
It's kind of like when I was a kid, I remember sitting in art class and kind of coming up with this series, the story series that I was like kind of creating. And I had this feeling overcome with me. This is like, 5-6 years before spirit science. And I remember having this feeling coming over me that was like, I'm going to do something big with my life. I don't know what that is, but I'm going to make something big. So I think that the seed was like planted in me a long time before. And I was relating it with this series that I was doing. It was really exciting. I'm still writing it actually as a story today. But, I think maybe somewhere deep down, like I always kind of knew that there was something for me to do here in this life. And so when spirit science blew up, there wasn't like a singular moment where I was like, oh crap, this is a big thing. It was kind of like a progressive realization that just continued to grow over time as I continued to step into greater and greater levels of responsibility. Because, when you start, I'm just making videos on the internet. Like it's very free flow. But over time, I've had to step into like, I have to learn to be a CEO. I have to learn how to run a company. I have to learn how to work with a team of animators. I have to learn to, all these different things, and really how to do it well, and I've also learned how not to do it a number of times, and really suffered the consequences of my decisions, kind of getting stuck in certain loops or certain habits or behaviors before I was ready to really step into this higher place right now. So, I mean, it's almost like, it's like a progressive, realization that just gets bigger and bigger with time. So maybe when I made spirit science starting to grow, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a big thing. And then, oh geez, now I'm like, maybe a year later, I'm like, oh, I'm going to make like pyramids all over the world, and that'll be great one day. And then in other years, and it's like, oh, it's big studio and animation teams and all these things. Oh, that's a great idea. It just keeps going, right? Mm-hmm. But in order to take those ideas and those dreams and bring them into reality, like I personally had to grow. And so it's like the vision and the realization is growing along with me.
This may be difficult to identify, but I'm thinking about personal growth, and I'm wondering if anything comes to mind when you think of that, of, oh, this was a cornerstone of my work. This was part of my core work personally in order to grow this. And maybe if that feels too broad, perhaps there's been something in the last year as far as running spirit science or how you're growing that you were like, this was a common theme, and this is kind of what I'm realizing.
I'm not sure I fully understand. You mean like a core thing that I like read or took in, or something that I created? Something
that you're working on personally. Like for me, I'm working on my perfectionism and my, my dance with humility and being, too much on one side or the other. What are you working on currently?
Right. Well, for me, I seem to be very continually allowing for a greater understanding and striving for an understanding of what it means to embody the Spirit of Christ. And, it's interesting because I know you're probably more asking in the direction of like, what are you trying to heal and work on? But I feel like if by setting the intention on something pure to become, then all of the other things, the anger and the depression or the anxiety or all these other things kind of fall away as a result of directing, one's focus towards that greater thing. And so the very first time I went and I did the ayahuasca, my intention was I want to embody the Spirit of Christ. And I received that miracle kind of in the form of this like Christ consciousness seed, this sacred holy flame that was also an ankh and also a cross and all of these things, this geometric sphere of light that entered into my heart and planted itself there. And it was like, this is something that, you have to nurture and grow, and through your practice, through your daily spiritual practice, through, like living your life. So I've had many different lessons kind of around that. And then every time I do the medicine, I'll set my intention on something that usually it'll just kind of come to me with some truth for me to step into. Like I'll set my intention on, like one time it was patience, one time it was ascension. Very recently I had one that was the Christ Sophia, which is the feminine Christ. You know, we always have this idea of Jesus and Christ being masculine and a man and all this stuff. But back in ancient history, there was actually a feminine Christ as well, called the Christ Sophia. And so I'm like connecting with that energy now, right? And while I'm here, my intention is success, because I want to experience just a higher level of taking spirit science to the next level and having really a bigger team, a really benevolent, pure-hearted team around me. So those are, all of it seems to be like, usually it's like my growth and the growth of spirit science are very parallel with each other. And the more that I, invest in myself and my growth, the better spirit science gets. And I think that's probably a really good lesson for anybody who's doing anything in the world. Is like, as long as you're putting yourself fully into the work that you're doing, then the work will mirror what you put into it and your growth as a result.
The vision that you shared about, being the embodiment of Christ. I mean, that statement in and of itself is like so immense that I'm still here like wrapping my mind around it with the casual way that you dropped it, my friend. But what I want to say about it is, to have an experience like that, to perceive that feels pretty unfathomable. And, to some people, again, they're shaking their heads going,
oh, of course.
Yeah. Okay. That person's losing it. So how did you not, I guess, feel that yourself? Because I guess that's a great question. Was there a part of you that when you were having that experience were like, I am losing my mind? Or you just always felt this kind of centered sense of, all is well here. In terms of that particular intention, I felt very balanced in it. But I think a lot of it came from the people who, said that I was the Messiah. But the thing is that the thing that people don't, or that I guess I always feel the need to clarify, is that all of us have the capacity to embody the Spirit of Christ. Mm-hmm. All of us. This is the ascension process. It's not one guy showing up and like just being like, "Hey guys, I'm Christ and nobody else can be." It's like that has the Spirit of Christ is something that is born within us and moves through us, that all of us can reach to the same level. Mm-hmm. And this was like the original teachings of really the original Christians, and even the pre-Christians from which Christianity emerged, the ancient Greek mysteries and the Gnostics and the Egyptians. All of them really were very similar to Christianity in the sense that they were all about embodying and becoming the Christ. Mm. And what that means is like living with the divine light within you to such a degree that really God uses you as a sacred instrument of the divine to share love, light, truth, and authenticity to the world. Mm-hmm. And that's something for all of us. And what's amazing is that, like, now I know many people have probably experienced this before I did, but after I had that experience, there have been so many times during ceremonies, at least 3 or 4 off the top of my head, that I've heard people say, usually in the sharing circles after a ceremony, like, I received the Christ consciousness, and people saying like they've got it. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. Like it's not just me, but I'm just in this position, I guess, where I have a loud voice in the world, meaning like I speak and it goes out to however many millions of people. And so, it feels, I think, to people like I'm exclusive, just as a result of me kind of being on this, creating this platform of spirit science. But there's so many people who are walking the same path, and the only thing that it takes is setting the intention to do so. Mm-hmm. And so there's sometimes some visions that I've had that have been so unbelievable. I have more faith in like ascension and embodying the Spirit of Christ than I would about manifesting some of these other visions, because like some things that I've received in dreams and in ceremonies are so big and crazy that I'm just like, well, I guess we'll see if that comes to pass, but I'm gonna just keep living my life. Yeah. I guess this brings up the question, because again, whenever I'm having these conversations, I'm always super aware that we all have different vernacular, and words are so choosy. And part of, my job is to understand and interpret what you're saying and consider how other people might be perceiving it. And I'm curious about, one, do you consider yourself a religious person or a spiritual person? What does that look like for you? And second, when you're talking about Christ consciousness, because I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, this is probably fair to assume that this is sort of your circle that you operate in, a term like that. It's pretty ubiquitous. People might know what you're talking about to some degree amongst your friends, but maybe there's someone listening to this that doesn't really know what that feels like or is. Could you find another way of describing, something so colossally indescribable, but just what that is to you?
Yeah. Feeling and knowing that you are one with everything in every moment, and living in service to that oneness that is everything in a loving, truthful, and authentic way.
Nice.
How's that?
I think that's that makes perfect sense to me.
Okay, great.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have a personal favorite spirit science video that you've made? I know, that's rude question.
No, that's a really good one. So, off the bat, everyone's favorite often is like the human history movie. So it would be like, I love that one too. I think
is that your most viewed video?
That is the most viewed one.
Okay.
I'm really excited about the Sumerian epic, although it's not done at the time of recording this, because that's like the new human history movie.
Okay.
Because the history subject is so fascinating. It's such something we can all explore, like really to just wild depths. But for me, the first thing when you asked that, I think the thing that really came to my mind was the Astral Projection episode. And I think the reason I like it so much was because, like, when I made the first series, I would do those first 12, which was, because the 12th one was 5 parts, it was, 16, 17 episodes. I made each one of those in 1 week. And so it was just like Monday I was scripting and recording, and by Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I was animating to get it ready for posting the next Monday, and then on to the next script. And it was just like this really just constant motion of making things. But with the Astral Projection one, I don't know how I managed to pull this out, but like I just like did not leave the computer like Friday to Sunday and animated an entire music video at the end of it. So there's like on top of the episode, which is already long, there's also like a 3 or 4 minute music video to Fireflies, the Owl City song. That is like this animation of a guy like astral projecting. And it's what's especially cool about that is like I sort of had one astral experience that I was trying to do, and I kind of had this vision of like flying through some trees in a big forest, and it was such a beautiful experience, and that like validated it for me. But that was about the extent of my astral projection experiences. Okay. But I was like, by putting this out there and getting people trying it, like I don't have the time to fully just devote my life to constantly trying to astral project, but like other people will, and they'll get it. So I put it out there and I was like, this is what maybe it could be like. And since then, like so many people have been like, yeah, I astral projected. It helped me because of that video. And like the video helped inspire them, gave them the motivation to learn how to do that and like learn how to become lucid in their dreams and stuff. And like, that's just really cool to think about that had that effect.
Super cool. Can you just briefly, for those who've never heard the term astral projection, can you just talk about what that is?
Yeah, it's basically the separation of your, not separation, but sort of the awareness that you and your body, your soul and your body may, how do I describe it? It's your energetic body of consciousness leaves your physical body. Your physical body's fine. They're still connected. It's breathing. It's basically like it's sleeping. But you, with a conscious awareness, leave your body and can fly around in sort of a lucid dream state and experience, things in this dimension or other dimensions. And that's basically it.
I remember a couple years ago, I was going through a pretty rough depression. And I started to basically become so disturbed that I had stopped sleeping almost entirely, or not getting restful sleep. So I look back on my journals from those times, and I had about 30 days of lucid dreaming straight every night. Remembered the entire dreams, felt like I was awake the entire night, had really like horrible inception dreams. Like I remember this one where I was in a dream that I was in my bed, and then I woke up in my bed and I went to the corner of my mattress and I lifted it up and there were maggots. And then that startled me so much that I woke up in my bed, and then I sat up in my bed, and then I went to the corner of my bed to check, and I lifted it up and there were cockroaches, and that startled me so much. Then I was back in my bed and I woke up. So like, just like crazy, disturbing sort of looping nightmares. And when I was awake, I wasn't really sure if I was awake. It had gotten to that point, pretty terrifying. And the funny thing is, I remember at one point trying to figure out how to stop it. And especially during the daytime, I would take naps because I was so tired because I wasn't sleeping at night. And during the daytime, I would have these wacky experiences where I would start falling asleep. And my body would start kind of, I was almost like a dolphin that's going below the surface and then above the surface of the water. That's how my consciousness was dipping in and out. And it was like, I'm asleep, I'm awake, I'm asleep, I'm awake. And you're in that in-between bardo state. And then sometimes I would start to hear like a really high-pitched like buzzer noise or like a screech. And it was so uncomfortable. It was just like painfully shrill. And the first time that happened, it startled me and I woke up and I was like, what was that? I'm really losing it. And then it happened a few more times. And because I had been meditating, I was just coaching myself, just like, relax. This is nothing. This is just part of those nightmares you've been having, and just let it go. And then what started to happen is I could feel my body completely fall asleep, but my mind was still awake, and started having these experiences where I had not, like, I couldn't feel anything except for a basic awareness of my face. It was like the rest of my body didn't exist, and super strange because you're not really asleep, you're not really awake. And I started to Google how to stop this phenomenon. I was like, what's happening to me? And what I stumbled upon was a whole bunch of people on Reddit talking about astral projection and how to start doing it. And I was like, am I astral projecting without, wanting to? And so that was funny, and that was strange. And that went on for a long time. And there was sort of this repeatable thing that would happen where my body would start to fall asleep. I would hear the high-pitched noise. I would feel this vacuum feeling of kind of like coming out of my body, or just all of a sudden just being in that space where I only had a face. And then there would be this roller coaster feeling of going, like when you're buckled into a roller coaster and it's clicking up to the top. It was like that. I could feel a rising, and then all of a sudden like a whoosh, and like a wind on my face, which was at that point the only thing that was left. And it happened like, I don't know, at least half a dozen times repeatedly in that exact fashion. It was just such a strange occurrence. And then eventually it stopped. But I don't know, that's my pseudo experience with astral projection or lucid dreaming. Very, very strange.
Yeah. You can also trigger it with the plant medicine. So you can kind of attribute that as well. If you've had sort of astral-like or lucid dream-like experiences with the plant medicine, is right. Because what it does is it activates your basically your dream state while you're awake. And then you can navigate it. And sometimes, it's always different with the plant medicine, but sometimes you leave your body, sometimes you don't, sometimes, you're gone. Who knows?
What's strange is I think this was before pretty much any of my experiences with plant medicine. But, now having had the experience with ayahuasca, I recognize it to be a very similar space. Very similar space.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about what you're most excited about now, what you're working on, what you're creating.
Yeah. So I'm just now launching a mystery school called Spirit Mysteries, which is sort of a throwback to the ancient Greek and ancient Egyptian mystery schools that were around back then. And it's like I'm trying to foster community. Like I feel like it's so valuable and so important for a sacred container for people to grow and to ask questions and to learn and to share and all of this kind of stuff, because it's just difficult to do in like YouTube comments and stuff like that. And I used to have a forum, but it got overrun by, it was a public free forum, and there were trolls and there were people who just really wanted to be like the ultimate teacher, and they would like steer the direction based on what they wanted and not really listen to or respect what other people had to say. And so I've been creating this mystery school that will basically be like more of a private container for people to come and connect together and learn and share and grow and be in community in a way that is sacred and pure and free of like hate and negativity and stuff like that. Because I think it's one of the most valuable things I can offer for people, in addition to all the the videos and stuff like that, is help bring people together. Because it's not just about me and my journey and everything like that. It's really about all of us growing together. And so Spirit Mysteries is a big thing. And then on top of that, I'm building a global team basically to help create more animations and more videos so that we can have a regular stream of content coming out on YouTube and on social media, like on a daily basis, on a weekly basis for different things. And I'm really excited about that.
Wow. So you're expanding quite rapidly.
Very rapidly, yeah.
So if there are people listening to this that want to be involved in either of those two things, the mystery school or potentially applying to be a part of the team, how would they get in touch with you?
Well, spiritmysteries.com is the home of Spirit Mysteries. And you can, when you enroll in Spirit Mysteries, that also comes with the application process to join the team. So all of that really fits together. And Spirit Mysteries also links back to all the other sites. So you can find Spirit Science and the Patch Tarot website, which we didn't talk about, but I have a tarot deck called Patch Tarot. And all of that you can find linked at the bottom of the Spirit Mysteries website. And they all sort of cross-link and connect with each other.
When did you first start getting into tarot?
I was introduced to tarot. Actually, Is it
tarot or tarot? Is it potato? I mean, or is there actually a correct way to say it?
As long as you're not pronouncing the T, people
tarot?
Tarot. As long as you're not saying tarot, yeah, or tarot.
Pass me the tarot, please.
It's all right. I mean, some people have a very specific, like it's tarot or it's tarot, and I kind of say both, and it kind of depending on how it rolls off the tongue in the moment, and it really depends on the intonation of like what other words you're saying around it. And
so the short is we have no idea.
Yeah, basically.
Awesome. Sounds like most of the things in my life.
But I actually stumbled upon tarot by accident when I was right after making the first season of Spirit Science, and I left and I was traveling around. I found this metaphysical shop called Paradise Found in Santa Barbara, California. And they had a giant wall of tarot cards. And I was just like, what is this? I'd never even heard of it before. And I couldn't choose because there were too many there. There was actually like too many choices. And so I decided to go with the only logical answer, which was get a blank deck. And they actually sold blank decks.
Wow.
So my first tarot deck was one that I actually drew.
That's so cool.
And so I started drawing, and I made that deck. And I actually never fully finished it. I got more than halfway though. And then I was introduced later to someone who really knew his stuff when it came to tarot. And we had like a 2-day, maybe 2.5 day ceremonial workshop, sacred space, lots of cannabis, but like lots of crystals and tarot. And we just like went through the entire deck in so many different ways. And the funny thing is like, I picked it up so fast. He was surprised. My mentor was surprised. He's like, I've never seen anybody get it as quickly as you just did. And so I think that maybe there's some like past life stuff. Maybe I knew it before. It's drawing upon the wisdom of Hermes or something to figure it out, because I just got it. It made sense to me. And so I started using the tarot a lot more regularly until I was like, I really want to teach this. I want to make a tarot series on spirit science, but it didn't seem right to do that until I had made a deck, because I had to make a card deck in order to teach it. And so after I came back to Canada I was living in California for a few years. I came back to Canada, and one of the very first things that I did when I got back was I drew the first card on the computer, which was the Fool, who has since evolved into the Child. And then from there, it just took off, and I made it over the course of a year and a half, and the ball just kept rolling until it was finally ready to publish. And now Patch Tarot exists, and I'm so happy with it and so grateful for the feedback and the responses that it's generated, because it really is like people are having just seeing the testimonials it's really moving to see that something that I made would have such an impact for so many people. And I'm really happy to see that it's being well received.
I saw that we have one here up in the library bookcase
I just dropped it off. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Great. At Soltara. Yeah, that's cool. We also have another friend, a mutual friend, Jennifer Sodini.
Yes, we do.
Who also has her own tarot deck.
Yes, she does. Hers is an oracle deck.
Oracle deck. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for correcting me. Yeah, she sent me one right before I came here to Costa Rica, and just also beautiful artwork on that. I want to ask you a question though, because again, I love to bridge the gap for people who are maybe curious about something like this, but they've never been given permission. They've maybe never been exposed to a tarot deck. No one's let them hold one. No one's given them a reading. And oftentimes when there's something even as simple as this, it's a little bit out of our comfort zone. There can be some fear. There can be some judgment. There can be like, what is this? Is this communing with, is this like the Ouija boards? Where am I talking to spirits? I'd love your perception of what's occurring when one is working with a tarot deck.
Well, first we have to be aware that when you do use a tarot deck, there is the artist's intention that would have gone into it. So if someone actually like made a tarot deck where it was like, this is the evil spirit conjuring tarot, and I'm certain there might be one that exists, then you might end up conjuring some spirits when you use
terrifying.
it. Yeah, no, of course. But like intention really dictates the whole flow of the things. But the tarot as it is a pictographic diagram of the universe based on Kabbalah, the 4 elements, tree of life, astrology, and like all these different, numerology, all these different systems weaving together to create kind of like this, it's a book of wisdom disguised as a deck of cards. Mm-hmm. And so when you're drawing a tarot card or doing a reading, what you're really doing is you're calling upon these sacred reflections of different universal archetypes in the human experience, and using the tarot imagery and the symbols and the ideas that are all linked in each card to facilitate a deeper reflection within you. And the result of that is it allows you to shine a flashlight on the subconscious that you might not ever think to look of, or to look to when you're doing a reading. So it really is this sacred, to me anyways, it's a sacred deck of cards that you can use to ask questions, and it will answer any question that you have. There's like nothing is off the limit, off the table, and yeah, we have to understand that there's nothing in reality that is separate from you, because everything is fundamentally connected. So even when you're drawing a card, even if you get something that kind of scares you, that's a trigger for you to investigate, well, why am I afraid? What's going on within me, and do this self-reflection in the deeper work. Because at the end of the day, tarot is a tool for ascension, a tool for growth, a tool for self-reflection, and helping you to get into a better relationship with yourself. Yeah, and the circumstances in your life, which are also a result of your personal relationship to it.
I think that was one of the most apt descriptions I've ever heard of it. I have a couple of decks myself, and I remember a friend asking me, well, like, what are you doing when you're using these cards? Like, who are you talking to? Are you talking to angels? Are you talking to God? Are you communing with dark spirits? And I said, well, I mean, for me, it's honestly the perception you put on it. But what I feel is almost exactly what you said. This is shining a light on my subconscious in the same way that dreams, dream interpretation, Jungian symbols, symbology, archetypes. It's like you and I could have a dream about the same thing, but it's not the same dream. It means something, there could be a red barn in your dream. There could be a red barn in my dream. Those symbols could mean the same thing. They could also mean something completely different based on our perception, based on what kind of feelings they elicit. Same thing with you and I both drawing the card of the Fool, or the Lovers, or it's there's so much that goes into even the setting of that day for you when you pull that card. What kind of mindset am I in when I pull the Lovers card? Is that triggering because I'm just thinking about a breakup? Or does that elicit feelings of joy because I've just started a new partnership? That's going to mean something different based on where I am. And so I think what you said is perfect. It's just another tool for almost talking to yourself, like a deeper part of yourself, and becoming illuminated to the mysteries that are just below the line of our consciousness.
Yes, very well said. I love that.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to share with us, how people can find you, anything else about your experience here this week before we sign off.
For your first question, again, Spirit Science, if you Google it, or spiritsciencecentral.com is the website. There's also Spirit Science on YouTube is probably the best thing, is like go subscribe on YouTube and you'll see all the new videos. And through the website too, you'll be able to find the Instagram and Facebook and whatever social media channel works the best. All of that has content going out fairly regularly. And, I guess final thoughts is I'm just really grateful. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Jordan. It's been such a pleasure. And I have a feeling that we'll be crossing paths again soon.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.